I still remember the smell of fresh coffee in the conference room that morning. The sun was bright through the glass walls, making everything look perfect and shiny. Just like Greg's fake smile. I sat down at my usual spot, notebook ready, not knowing my world was about to crash. Greg, my boss of 3 years at Altira Real Estate, stood at the head of the table in his expensive suit. His voice stayed calm and sweet, like nothing was wrong. "Before we start today's meeting, there's something we need to address," he said, looking around the room, but not at me. "Unfortunately, we've decided to part ways with Jessica Blake." My heart stopped. The room went quiet. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me. "The role demands someone with sharper instincts," Greg continued. "Real estate is fast, and frankly, Jessica hasn't been able to keep up." My face burned hot. I couldn't breathe. 3 years of late nights, saved deals, and perfect reports. Gone in one sentence. "You can clean out your desk after the meeting," he added, already moving on to the next topic. I sat frozen as he continued talking about quarterly goals like he hadn't just destroyed my career. When I finally stood to leave, my legs felt like jelly. Through the glass walls, I saw the maintenance guy already scraping my name off my office door. The next few days passed in a blur. My phone, once buzzing with work messages, sat silent on my kitchen counter. I sent emails to contacts I'd made in the industry. Most went unanswered. The few replies were short and cold. "Sorry to hear about your situation. We don't have any openings right now." I tried calling Mark, a recruiter who'd been trying to poach me just last month. His assistant said he was busy. He never called back. Word travels fast in commercial real estate. Greg had made sure of that. By the end of the week, I heard through an old colleague what everyone was saying. Jessica Blake, the incompetent girl who fumbled the West Hill warehouse deal. $12 million down the drain because she couldn't spot the obvious issues. I stared at my laptop screen, tears of anger burning my eyes. The truth was exactly the opposite. I had spotted the issues. I had the proof. I opened a folder on my personal drive and found it, my memo from 3 months ago with the subject line, "Urgent, West Hill Warehouse Risk Assessment." The date stamp showed I'd sent it 6 weeks before Greg approved the deal. In it, I'd listed every problem, every red flag. I'd specifically warned against moving forward without additional inspections. Greg had ignored it all, and now I was taking the blame. On day 10 of my unemployment, I finally stopped crying in the shower. Instead, I got angry. Real, clear-headed angry. The kind that makes you think straight. I called Carolyn Haynes. We'd worked together 2 years ago, before she left for a bigger firm. I'd saved her hospitality project when the numbers weren't adding up. She'd promised to return the favor someday. "Jessica," she answered on the first ring. "I heard what happened. Greg Stanton is a snake." We met at a small cafe downtown, away from the usual business lunch spots. Carolyn looked sharp in her designer suit, a Veyron Holdings pin on her lapel. I felt underdressed in my casual clothes, but she hugged me like it didn't matter. I told her everything, the West Hill deal, my warnings, the public firing. I showed her my memo on my tablet. "This is everything I feared," she said, reading it carefully. "The structural issues, the zoning complications, the cost overruns, you called it all." I nodded, swallowing hard, and Greg ignored every word. Carolyn set down her coffee cup with purpose. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned forward. "What Greg doesn't know is, we're buying his entire portfolio." My heart skipped. "What?" "Veyron Holdings is acquiring Altira's commercial division, including everything Greg oversees." Carolyn's words hung in the air between us. I struggled to understand what this meant for me. "We need someone who knows those properties inside out," she explained. "Someone who can tell us where the problems are hidden, who understands the real value beyond what's in the official reports." I sat up straighter. "I managed most of those acquisitions. I know every square foot, every tenant issue, every maintenance problem they've been hiding." "Exactly," Carolyn smiled. "How would you like to come work for Veyron as a strategic consultant? You'd report directly to me during the acquisition." My mind raced. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a chance to show my real value, to correct the record. "I'd want full operational control of the review process," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Complete access to all records and personnel." Carolyn raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Done." She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a consulting contract with Veyron Holdings, with a salary that made me blink twice. "You start Monday," she said. "Congratulations, Jessica. You're going back in." I signed the paper with a steady hand, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth. Exactly 33 days after my firing, I stood in the elevator of the Altira building, my heart pounding against my ribs. I wore a navy blue suit I'd bought with my first Veyron paycheck. My hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Around my neck hung a Veyron Holdings visitor badge. The doors opened on the 14th floor, my old floor. The receptionist did a double take when she saw me. I smiled politely and walked past her to the main conference room where the transition meeting was scheduled to begin. I paused outside the glass doors, watching Greg hold court. He was laughing, showing off his new Rolex, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The room fell silent. Greg's sentence died mid-word as he saw me standing there. "What is she doing here?" His voice cracked slightly, his face draining of color. Carolyn walked in behind me, followed by two Veyron executives. "Good morning, everyone," she announced to the room. "I'm Carolyn Haynes, Managing Director at Veyron Holdings. As you know, we're acquiring Altira's commercial division. Jessica Blake will be our lead transition executive. She'll be reviewing divisional performance, restructuring leadership, and optimizing operations across this portfolio." Greg's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "But," I walked to the front of the room. "Let's get started. I'll need access to your last 6 quarters of reporting, all leasing data, and internal memos on the West Hill warehouse project," I said, opening my laptop at the head of the table where Greg usually sat. Greg remained standing, looking lost in his own conference room. "This is unusual. Jessica was let go for incompetence. She's not qualified." "She wasn't incompetent," Carolyn cut in coldly. "You were just too insecure to recognize her value." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Greg's team looked between us, sensing a shift in power they didn't yet understand. I kept my voice professional. "I'll also need to speak with your department heads individually. We'll start with a full audit of your division, given the discrepancies we've already noted in preliminary reviews." A junior analyst named Tyler raised his hand. "I can pull those reports for you, Miss Blake." "Thank you, Tyler," I said, remembering how he'd avoided eye contact when I was packing my things. Greg tried to regain control. "I should oversee what information is shared during this transition." "That won't be necessary," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "Veyron now has controlling interest in this division. Full transparency is required." As everyone filed out to gather the requested materials, Tyler slipped me a folder. "There's more," he whispered. "You'll want to see this." That night, I spread the documents across my dining table. Official reports showing solid returns on one side, Tyler's unofficial documents showing the truth on the other. The discrepancies were shocking. Properties listed at 85% occupancy were actually hovering around 60%. Maintenance costs were being shifted from one building to another to hide systematic problems. And the West Hill warehouse, the deal Greg had blamed on me, was worse than even I had realized. Greg had not only ignored my warnings, but actively concealed them from upper management. He'd approved the deal, knowing it would eventually collapse, hoping to flip it quickly before the problem surfaced. I marked inconsistencies in red, creating a map of deception across quarters and properties. The pattern was clear. It wasn't just incompetence, it was deliberate misrepresentation. And Greg's signature was on every document. I focused on one memo in particular, dated just days before the West Hill approval. Greg had written, "Adjust occupancy projections upward by 20% across reports. We need these numbers to secure the board's approval." I marked it with a bright red sticky note. This was the smoking gun, proof of knowing misrepresentation. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Carolyn. "Finding anything interesting?" I snapped a photo of my document-covered table and sent it back. Her response came seconds later. "Perfect. Keep digging." The next day, I set up meetings with Greg's team members. One by one, they came to the small office Veyron had set up for me, across the hall from Greg's corner office, with its expensive view. "Everything you say is confidential," I assured each person. I'm trying to understand how decisions were made, not assign blame to staff who were following orders. Most were cautious at first, but as word spread that I was actually listening, people started opening up. We were told to change numbers on reports, admitted Lisa from accounting. If a property wasn't performing, Greg would tell us to move expenses around to make it look better on paper. He called it temporary reallocation, added Marco from operations. Said all firms did it to smooth out reporting. By my 5th interview, a clear picture was emerging. Greg had created a culture of fear and manipulation, where questioning his decisions meant risking your job. Did anyone ever push back? I asked Keith, who'd been at Altira even longer than me. He glanced nervously at the door. You did, that's why you're gone. I kept my face neutral, though my heart was racing. Was there documentation of these reallocations? Keith hesitated, then nodded. Greg kept a separate spreadsheet. He called it his balancing act. I recorded every word, saving the files securely in Veyron's protected server. I ran into Greg in the break room on the 3rd day. I was pouring coffee when he appeared beside me, flashing his trademark smile. Jessica, he said, voice dripping with false friendliness. I think we got off on the wrong foot. This transition is stressful for everyone. I stirred cream into my coffee, keeping my face neutral. It certainly is. I hope we can start over, he continued, leaning against the counter. Water under the bridge, right? We're all professionals here. I gave him a small smile. Of course. His shoulders relaxed slightly, thinking he was making progress. I decided to test him. I'm particularly interested in the Willowbrook development, I said casually. The numbers there seem creative. Greg froze, coffee mug halfway to his lips. Willowbrook was a property that had never been publicly disclosed. It was being developed through a shell company that only top executives knew was connected to Altira. How do you know about that project? He asked, his voice suddenly tight. I let my smile widen just slightly. I kept receipts, Greg, on everything. The color drained from his face as he realized what I meant. I had documentation, records, proof. If you'll excuse me, I said, stepping around him, I have a meeting with the compliance team. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to bury Greg's career 10 times over. I organized everything into a comprehensive report and presented my findings to Carolyn. This goes beyond poor management, Carolyn said, flipping through the documentation. Some of this could be considered fraud. If Veyron takes full ownership, we inherit this liability. I nodded. I've highlighted the most concerning issues. The pattern of misrepresentation dates back at least 2 years. And it's not just the West Hill project. Carolyn leaned back in her chair, thinking, we need to bring in legal. This changes our acquisition strategy. What do you want me to do next? I asked. Initiate a formal audit, she said decisively. Full scope, no restrictions. If we're buying this division, we need to know exactly what we're getting. I felt a flutter of nervous energy. A formal audit would mean putting everything on record. There would be no hiding the truth anymore, for anyone. You have the authority, Carolyn added. Use it. I nodded and returned to my temporary office. I drafted the formal audit notification and addressed it to Greg. My finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before I clicked it. The email was brief and professional. This notice serves to inform you that a formal audit of your division will commence Monday. All materials must be prepared within 72 hours. The audit announcement sent shockwaves through Altira. Executive assistants scurried between offices with stacks of folders. Conference rooms were booked for urgent strategy sessions. And Greg was nowhere to be seen. He called in sick today, his assistant told me nervously when I came looking for the preliminary documents. By lunchtime, rumors were flying. I kept my head down, focusing on the data, not the drama. But when Maya from IT stopped by my office, I knew something was happening. You should know, she whispered, closing my door. Greg accessed the server remotely last night. He was online until 3 a.m., deleting files. My heart sank. Can you recover them? She nodded. I've been mirroring his activities since the audit was announced. Company policy. Smart, I said, impressed. Can you show me what he removed? We spent the afternoon reconstructing Greg's digital trail. He'd deleted dozens of documents, mostly emails and internal memos related to troubled properties. But Maya had everything backed up. This one seems important, she said, pulling up a file titled West Hill Redevelopment, Internal Memo, Risk Concealment. We read it together, and my hands began to shake. The memo detailed exactly how Greg had intentionally concealed known structural issues to push the deal through, the very issues I'd warned about. He knew, I whispered. He knew all along. And he blamed you for it, Maya finished. The next morning, I printed the recovered memo and walked straight to Carolyn's office. I didn't email it or call ahead. Some bombs needed to be delivered in person. He deleted this, I said, placing it on her desk, but IT recovered it. Carolyn read it slowly, her expression hardening with each paragraph. The memo was dated 2 weeks before the West Hill approval and addressed directly to Greg. Critical structural issues identified. Recommend immediate halt to acquisition. Potential liability exceeds $4 million. Suggest renegotiation or withdrawal. And at the bottom, Greg's response, handwritten and scanned. Proceed as planned. Bury the report. We need this win for Q3. Carolyn looked up. This directly contradicts everything he told the board about West Hill. He said nobody saw these problems coming. I saw them, I said quietly. I warned him in writing. He fired me to cover it up. Carolyn's eyes flashed with anger. This isn't just mismanagement anymore. This is deliberate deception. She picked up her phone and dialed her legal team. Change of plans. I want a complete leadership removal strategy for Altira Commercial. Yes, immediately. When she hung up, her face was set with determination. He's not walking away from this clean. Keep going, Jessica. Find everything. Greg missed our scheduled audit meeting the next day. His assistant looked nervous when she delivered his message. He's having car trouble, she said, not meeting my eyes. He'll reschedule for tomorrow. I smiled politely. That's fine. Please tell him the audit continues with or without his presence. By afternoon, Greg had also canceled his presentation to potential investors. By evening, he'd rescheduled all his meetings for the following week. He's panicking, Carolyn said when I updated her. Good. That night, I received a company-wide email from Greg. Due to personal matters requiring my attention, I may need to step back from some responsibilities temporarily. Please direct urgent inquiries to my team. I forwarded it to Carolyn with a single question mark. Her reply came minutes later. Legal says he's contacted outside counsel. He knows we're on to him. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen. After years of watching Greg take credit for others' work while dodging responsibility for his mistakes, justice was finally catching up to him. Part of me had expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely calm. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, about fixing what had been broken. I sent a short reply to Carolyn. Should we slow down the audit? Her answer was immediate. Absolutely not. Full speed ahead. On day 5 of the audit, I received an anonymous email from inside Altira. The subject line read simply, "You should see this." Attached was a draft memo Greg had written but never sent. It was addressed to Altira's executive committee and dated just days after my firing. The recent performance issues in commercial division stem primarily from personnel failures. Specifically, the decision to promote Jessica Blake to senior manager last year proved disastrous. Her lack of judgment and failure to identify risks led directly to the West Hill collapse. I recommend a thorough review of our hiring and promotion practices to prevent similar mistakes. I read it twice, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. Even after firing me, he'd planned to further destroy my reputation to protect himself. I didn't respond to the email. I simply saved the document to my growing file of evidence, labeling it Exhibit 27, Attempted Defamation. Later that day, I passed Greg in the hallway. He was on his phone, looking stressed. When he saw me, he quickly turned away, pretending not to notice me. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because while Greg was hiding, I was finishing my formal audit report. A comprehensive, meticulously documented account of every deception, every manipulation, every failure of leadership under his watch. It was devastating, and it was bulletproof. I spent the entire weekend finalizing my report. 98 pages of detailed analysis with supporting documents, witness statements, and financial records. I organized everything by project, by date, by impact severity. The executive summary was brutal in its clarity. Under current leadership, Altira Commercial Division has systematically misrepresented asset performance, concealed material risks, and engaged in accounting practices that violate both company policy and industry standards. I sent the completed report to Carolyn Sunday night. By Monday morning, she had called an emergency meeting with Veyron's executive team. "This changes everything," she told them. My report, open on the conference table. "We need to completely restructure this acquisition." The CEO of Veyron, a stern woman named Patricia Morton, read through the key findings. "This level of mismanagement borders on criminal," she said, looking up at me. "You've done extraordinary work, Miss Blake." "Thank you," I said, trying to stay professional despite the surge of validation I felt. "We need you to present these findings to Altira's board," Patricia continued. "Tomorrow morning? Can you do that?" I nodded, my heart racing. "Yes." Carolyn squeezed my shoulder. "You built this case. You should be the one to deliver it." "And Greg?" I asked. Patricia's expression hardened. "Let him try to explain himself to the board." The next morning felt surreal. I stood outside the same executive boardroom where I'd sat through countless meetings, always somewhere in the middle of the table, never at the head. Now, here I was, about to lead the most important presentation of my career. When I walked in, the room was already full. Altira's board members sat on one side, Veyron executives on the other, and there, at the far end, was Greg. He wore an expensive suit as always, but his usual confidence was gone. He looked pale, almost gray, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Carolyn introduced me and then stepped aside. All eyes turned to me as I connected my laptop to the projector. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady. "I've completed a comprehensive audit of Altira Commercial Division, focusing on portfolio performance, reporting accuracy, and management practices." I clicked to the first slide, a simple graph showing reported versus actual occupancy rates across properties. The lines diverged dramatically. As you can see, there are significant discrepancies between what was reported to this board and the actual performance of these assets. An older board member leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "These differences are substantial." "Yes, sir," I agreed, "and deliberate." He turned to look directly at Greg. "You approve these numbers?" Greg shifted in his seat, his confidence crumbling visibly. "I can explain." For 2 hours, I presented my findings. With each new slide, each new revelation, Greg seemed to physically shrink. By the time I finished, the board members were exchanging looks of shock and anger. The chairman spoke first. "This is deeply disturbing. We'll need time to review this in full." Veyron's CEO nodded. "Of course. But our acquisition terms will need to be renegotiated in light of these findings." After the meeting, Greg was escorted to a smaller conference room where Altira's legal team was waiting. I watched through the glass as they spoke, their expressions grave. Greg kept shaking his head, running his hands through his hair. An hour later, Carolyn found me at my temporary desk. "They've given him a choice," she said. "Resign quietly with a modest severance, or face a formal misconduct investigation that could lead to legal charges." "What did he choose?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Greg always took the easy way out. "Early retirement, effective immediately," Carolyn confirmed. "The paperwork just needs final signatures from the transition team." From me, she meant. I would be signing off on Greg's exit package. When the documents arrived in my inbox that afternoon, I reviewed them carefully, checking every detail. Then I signed my name neatly at the bottom. As I clicked submit, Greg passed by my office. He tried to make eye contact. I kept working, not looking up. The day after Greg's departure, Veyron announced its restructuring plan for Altira's commercial division. I was named Interim Director of Operations, responsible for stabilizing the portfolio and implementing new reporting systems. My first task was addressing the mess Greg had left behind. I met with each property team, reviewing their challenges and resources. No fancy speeches, just honest conversations about what needed fixing. "We've got 3 major tenants threatening to leave Parkview Plaza," reported Sam, a property manager who'd always been straight with me. "They say maintenance requests have been ignored for months." "Make them our top priority," I told him. "We'll allocate emergency funds to address their concerns immediately." Carolyn had given me authority to approve up to $50,000 per property for critical repairs, something Greg had never allowed without weeks of bureaucratic delays. By the end of the week, we'd resolved 2 tenant crises and identified solutions for a dozen more. The team's mood was cautiously optimistic, a welcome change from the fear that had permeated Greg's reign. As I walked back to my office, Keith, the veteran who'd warned me about Greg's separate balancing spreadsheets, stopped me in the hallway. "You know," he said quietly, "you should have been running this place from the start." I felt a rush of validation, sweeter than any revenge could have been. I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. Now I am. Not everyone embraced the new leadership. Greg's former deputy, Marcus, had been his right-hand man for years. He'd benefited from the same system of favoritism and corner-cutting. When I asked him for updated projections on the troubled East Side project, he sent back Greg's old numbers, unchanged. "These don't reflect the actual condition of the property," I said during our one-on-one meeting. "We need accurate reporting moving forward." Marcus leaned back in his chair, my arms crossed. "These numbers worked fine for 5 years. I don't see why we need to change everything just because you have a personal vendetta against Greg." I kept my voice calm. "This isn't personal. It's about honest business practices." "It seems very personal from where I'm sitting," he shot back. The next day, he missed our follow-up meeting. When I checked his recent work, I found he'd been telling property managers to continue operating under previous guidance. I'd given him a chance. He'd made his choice. I drafted a termination letter, citing Clause 9 of his contract, neglect of fiduciary duty in providing accurate financial reporting. The letter was on his desk by noon. By 2 p.m. he was escorted out of the building. Carolyn called me after receiving my report on the situation. "You just saved us $4 million in potential losses," she said. "Keep going." Over the next 2 weeks, I rebuilt the division from the ground up. New reporting templates, new approval processes, new maintenance schedules. I promoted people who had been overlooked under Greg's leadership and created clear paths for advancement based on performance, not favoritism. The West Hill warehouse, the project that had supposedly been my downfall, required special attention. I brought in structural engineers to fully assess the damage, environmental consultants to address the contamination issues, and legal experts to determine our options. The conclusion: the property could be salvaged, but only with significant investment. I presented Veyron with 3 options, complete with cost projections and timeline estimates. They approved my recommendation immediately. With the most urgent fires contained, I wrote my final summary report on the division's transition. 30 pages of clear, factual assessment. The last page read simply, "Conclusion: gross mismanagement by former leadership created systemic issues throughout the portfolio. With proper oversight and transparent reporting, these properties can return to profitability within 18 months. I didn't mention Greg by name. I didn't need to. Carolyn forwarded my report to Altira's parent company. Their response came within hours, a request for me to meet with their executive team to discuss a permanent position. Veyron's acquisition of Altira Commercial was finalized on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 months after Greg had fired me in front of my colleagues. The announcement went out company-wide. Veyron Holdings completes acquisition of Altira Commercial Division. A second email followed minutes later. Leadership announcement: Jessica Blake, named Regional Executive, Veyron Commercial Properties. My new office was on the executive floor, larger than my old space, with windows overlooking the city skyline. As I unpacked my things, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed. My new role gave me authority over all properties formerly under Greg's control, plus additional assets Veyron had acquired in the region. My team was twice the size, my budget 3 times larger. During my afternoon walkthrough of the building, I passed by my old office, the one I'd been forced to clear out in humiliation. The door stood open, the room empty except for basic furniture. The nameplate was gone, leaving only faint marks on the wall where it had once been mounted. I paused, allowing myself a moment to remember the pain of that day, the shame, the anger, the fear. Then I continued down the hall, back straight, eyes forward. That chapter was closed. This was a new beginning, not just for me, but for everyone who had suffered under poor leadership. "Miss Blake," my new assistant appeared. "Your next meeting is ready." I nodded. "I'm coming." 3 months into my new role, I discovered something disturbing. During a routine financial review, I noticed a discrepancy in one of the earliest properties Greg had acquired, a small office complex called Riverside Center. The initial purchase documents showed unexplained cost overruns that had been buried in subsequent reports. Digging deeper, I found a $3.2 million deficit that had never been properly accounted for. This wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping. This was a deliberate attempt to hide a massive financial hole, one that still affected our current balance sheets. I spent a weekend reconstructing the paper trail, following the money through years of creative accounting. What I found was Greg's original sin. He'd overpaid for the property to secure a personal kickback, then hidden the loss through years of manipulated reports. Monday morning, I presented my findings to Carolyn with a solution already mapped out. Restructure the debt, renegotiate with the lenders, and absorb the loss in our stronger performing properties. This would have tanked us if it had surfaced during the transition, Carolyn said, reviewing my plan. How did you even find this? I was looking at historical acquisition patterns, I explained. The numbers didn't add up. She shook her head, impressed. You don't miss a thing, do you? I allowed myself a small smile. Not anymore. Within 48 hours, we had contained the financial damage. Another crisis averted. I received an unexpected email from Tyler, the junior analyst who had first slipped me the folder of hidden documents. I need to apologize, he wrote. When Greg fired you, I believed the rumors. I laughed with others about the incompetent girl who couldn't handle pressure. I was wrong. Watching you work has changed how I see leadership. I remembered the pain of those whispers, but also how fear had ruled under Greg. I typed a simple reply. You'll do better. That's what matters. Later, I spotted Tyler in the break room looking nervous. I'm putting together a task force, I said. I need people who spot problems before they become crises. Interested? His face brightened. Absolutely. 6 months after my return, Veyron announced a major expansion. Our revitalized commercial division had outperformed all projections. My permanent office was finished that week, a corner suite with a door that opened with satisfying weight. My name on a simple plaque, Jessica Blake, Regional Executive. The view overlooked Altira Tower, the flagship property that had once been Greg's pride. Now it was part of my portfolio. I gathered my presentation materials for the quarterly review. Honest numbers, clear assessments, no tricks, no hidden disasters. As I walked to the meeting, employees nodded respectfully. I'd earned my place here through competence, not politics. I remembered standing in this same doorway, devastated and humiliated. How different things looked from the other side. 1 year after Greg fired me, I closed the books on our most successful quarter yet. Every property was thriving. Tenant satisfaction had doubled, and we'd just expanded our portfolio by 30%. In my detailed quarterly report, I never once mentioned Greg Stanton's name. Not once. He had become irrelevant to our success. On my desk sat a small crystal award, Executive of the Year. I thought about how far I'd come. Success wasn't about being the loudest or taking credit. It wasn't about putting others down. It was about doing the work, standing by your principles, and having the patience to let truth reveal itself. I walked out of the building and into the cool evening air. Greg had once told everyone I was incompetent, but I hadn't fought fire with fire. I'd simply done my job. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better.